All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Music Forward's industry session. My name is DeMarco White, and I'm the Institutional Partnerships Manager for Music Forward. Our topic today is going to be all about music supervision. And before we get into introducing our panelists, I want to lay out our ground rules as normal. Music Forward Foundation is a national nonprofit organization in the House of Blues and Live Nation family, and our mission is to transform young lives, inspire careers, and champion a more inclusive music industry. We provide artist development and career development programs for youth to inspire the next generation of leaders and innovators. So we welcome all the young people in our audience today here to learn from an experienced group of professionals that are doing great work in the music industry. With that said, we are very excited to have today's professionals here to talk about their amazing careers. As we know, music supervision combines music and visuals to provoke the desired emotions for movies, TVs, commercials, and video games. And throughout today's conversation, we're going to go behind the scenes into visual media and learn what it takes to not only be a music supervisor, but what are the talents and skills that you need to be successful in the role. And so I want to bring out all of our professionals who will be joining us in today's session, and we're going to kick this thing off. All right, I'm here alone. So there we go. Tony, Rafi, yes, Joel, Angela, we did it. All right. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here today. We are going to have, one, we're going to have a great time today. Two, I feel like we're going to talk about a lot. Just in our little green room session, we had a lot of good conversations. But before we get into that, I want to do introductions. And Tony, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do in the industry, and sort of what brings you to today's conversation.
My name's Tony Scudellari. I am head of TV music for Sony Pictures TV. We have about 60 to 70 shows a year that we produce. Everything from game shows and soap operas to comedies, dramas, unscripted programs as well. I also music supervise some of our shows, mainly our reality series, our multi-camera comedies, and some of our dramas. I have a staff that works with me on creative. And I've been doing it at Sony for about 15 years. And prior to that, I was an independent music supervisor for 9.
Cool. Thanks, Tony. Joe, how about yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and what you bring to today's conversation.
Sure. I am a music supervisor and have been independent for the past 15 years. I'm the president of the Guild of Music Supervisors. And before that, I was the head of music for Trimark Pictures and Lionsgate. My biggest client since I left Lionsgate in 2006 was Tyler Perry. And so I've been working with him and Tyler Perry Studios ever since, and also work on tons of independent films, television series, games, and whatever gets thrown at me, I'm up for it.
Good. Thank you. Angela, how about yourself? Introduce yourself to our audience and what you bring to the table here.
Yeah, cool. Hey, everyone. My name is Asistio. I'm a music supervisor and producer at Music and Strategy. I work with global brands such as Google, Ford, Ralph Lauren, and others. I also work on film and TV. Recent films include VHS, Dear Santa, and Underplayed. Prior to that, I worked as a music coordinator at Format on films such as A Star is Born and Pitch Perfect. And for that, I was at Republic Records working on A&R and film and TV soundtracks. Worked on soundtracks such as Mad Men, Beat Bugs, and Hunger Games.
Cool. And Rafi, last but not least, introduce yourself to the world.
I'm Raphaella Lima. I work for Electronic Arts, the video game company. I do music supervision, partnerships, and marketing when it comes to music. And we have a really small department, so we touch all titles that EA puts out there, from commercials, trailers, in-game events, turning musicians into characters, creating beyond with them. Once a sync is in place, we then sort of get creative and try to build on a song placement and make something more out of it. So
Yeah, thank you all so much for being here. And I want to start today's conversation diving deep into your careers and into your success. I feel like I've always sort of known that music plays an important part in TV and film and sharing a story, and music is an extension of the dialogue in whatever format it might be, whether it's games, whether it's ad commercials or movies. But I don't ever remember anyone saying to me, yeah, that's a music supervisor. You can do that. That's a job. And so I'm curious, as professionals who have been in this game for such a long time, when was the first moment where you knew that this was a role that one existed and another that you could actually pursue? And Tony, we'll start with you.
I didn't know about it till after I got started.
Yeah.
I became friends with music supervisor, when we started, I started on production and, found out about what a music supervisor does, and just found it to be a really great job. I mean, there's a lot to it. But I had no idea when I was in college or anything like that. I think fortunately the process and the understanding, thanks to, Joel and the Guild and a number of different music supervisors, just getting out there, letting people know what the role is. When I started, it was not a known profession. So, but their visibility has gone up. The Guild, I know I don't want to step on your toes, Joel, but the Guild was responsible for making sure, for example, that there is any consideration for the role of a music supervisor. That was something that was never done before. And I think, the awareness and the level of visibility is getting more so. And I think because of that, it provides an opportunity for hearing a number of different voices to be heard on the creative side.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Angela, I'm curious on your thoughts on this question, because being a graduate of USC, you studied political science. And so how did you find your way into this music supervision space?
Yeah, I mean, I was always intrigued by the marriage of music and visual media, but like you said, it wasn't really, I guess, emphasized as a job before. So I kind of actively sought it out, actually. I think I posted, honestly, it was like a MySpace status. I was like, what is this job that does this thing? And someone responded. And after that, I got an internship with this music supervisor named Alan Mason, who had worked on a lot of Barry Levinson films. And that was kind of my first foray into it. And I just kind of kept seeking it out after that. But definitely had to kind of dig a little bit for it. I wish I had the GMS around, and I'm so glad that it exists now. And it,
Can you elaborate on GMS and what that is?
I feel like Joel should take that. Yeah. He's a pro.
Yes, Joel, a GMS.
He's the president.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joel, you're muted. Okay, let me.
You're muted.
You're saying such great things.
Sorry, there's noises around here, so I'm muted. Okay. But yes, so the Guild's been around for a little over 10 years, and it started with, like Tony said, that a lot of people didn't even know the career existed when we kind of started. And so there was probably a big group of about like a dozen or so music supervisors who were constantly getting together and kind of crying in our beers about this issue or that. Wow. And so we kind of, got together, and with the kind of like spurring of the great and powerful Maureen Crow, kind of all got together and said, well, why don't we start pointing ourselves in the same direction? Yeah. So this, kind of small group over dinner got together and said, let's do it. And we set our sights first on Grammys, because at that point, we weren't even eligible to join the Recording Academy as music supervisors. We weren't even considered eligible for membership, let alone awards. So we got in a big room with Neil Portnow, who is the president of the Grammys at the time. And there was, like I said, a good 20 or so music supervisors went kind of around the room and said, you realize that this room full of people is in charge of more kind of creative decisions and economic engine than many of the record labels that you guys have as members, and that we're not even part of the discussion is an insult. And within, weeks, they changed the rules to allow us to become members and to allow us to be eligible for trophies. And we kind of realized that there was power in a guild. Yeah. And we've kind of been on fire ever since. Like Tony said, we set our sights on the Television Academy and had lots of very productive discussions. There's a lot of people who, again, because this career has been around for a while, but it's been very under the radar and very niche. But with the advent, especially of so much television and everything that's streaming, and so it's just the career has really just blossomed in the last several years. And so we're kind of we have a membership now of over 400 full members, and an extended outreach of friends of the guild of well over 1,000. And people can sign up as kind of like become plugged into the community, and we do weekly panels. We do showcases for people. We're still doing advocacy for we're trying to do for the craft. But again, I've been involved since the founding, and only recently took over as president, along with Madonna Wade Reed as vice president in October. And it's been crazy. It's been a totally changing landscape, and we're working really, really hard. We're an all volunteer organization trying to do a lot. And I think that, we're fighting for people who are, culturally and from business side, really, really important to entertainment. And we totally believe in it.
Yes. Thank you for sharing all that, Angela. Thank you. The co-moderation. Thanks for the alley-oop there. I think it was definitely well said, Joel. And we're going to talk more about the guild later on in today's conversation. Angela, I want to go back to you quickly before we switch over to Rafi. I'm curious because a lot of times this comes up in these sessions where it's talked about where I got an internship, I got this opportunity, and the number one question that we're always being asked by our participant is like, how, right? My goal in presenting these sessions is really to eliminate sort of chance out of the music industry, because I feel like that has been the rhetoric that's been, I was in the right place at the right time, and it's like, but what did you really do? Like, who did you speak to? So can you talk to us more about that first internship and that opportunity that you had with the music supervisor that you mentioned, specifically around how did you articulate to this person that like, hey, take a chance on me. I want to learn from you, and I'm worth that investment.
Yeah, so I actually got that internship because I was working at the radio station at the time at USC, and obviously a lot of music buffs were involved with the radio station, and someone had worked with them before. So it was just my proximity to that music supervisor. And I mean, I think that brings up a really interesting point, because it was the privilege that I had of being able to attend USC and, being able to be in proximity with this person. But, I think places like the GMS are opening up those avenues so that you don't necessarily have to go to a certain institution to get close to people who can help you out. I think the music business is a really small industry, and the way that I've gotten most of my jobs is honestly through referrals and word of mouth and friends. And so I think it's really important to sort of open up those avenues. I mean, I think people are definitely working on it, but that was how I particularly got that internship.
Yeah. I think also being in the right place and around the right people is part of it, but also kudos to yourself and being able to actually articulate who you are and what you want. That's the biggest part of being able to take on an opportunity like that. So I don't want to go on this conversation without mentioning that.
And yeah, you're right. I mean, I think just talking to people, bringing it up, even if you don't know what it is, you're like, who's that person that does this thing? Like, who's the person that hires composers, or who is it that does that? I mean, eventually someone will have the answer if you just put it out there.
Yeah. Now, Rafi, you are in an interesting space when it comes to the music supervision, where you are working currently primarily in electronic arts and in the gaming world, which is, I don't think ever a time I was like, who actually puts the music to games, because I feel like the games are dependent on sort of the person who's playing them, right? How successful you are, how often you're dying in the game, or whatever that might be. Talk to us about how you found out sort of being able to present music in the gaming space worked for you, or where did you find that opportunity?
Well, I think music for me in general, and being able to work with music, was a kind of like a big discovery as I was about to graduate from college, and we're going around our marketing class, and I was a marketing major. And one of my friends says that she wanted to be a product manager. And I'm like, what's a product manager? She's like, oh, we do this for a band. And I'm like, wait a minute. And it was just so naive of me to think that to be in music, I needed to be a musician, right? Like, I grew up in Brazil. Music was my entire life, and I wasn't a great singer, so I got out of that and played my piano to myself, but had my stage fright. I was like, I'm doomed. I can't be in this world, right? I never thought about the business side of it. So that was a huge, incredible sort of like, even my husband, as we started a date, and he worked at Capitol Records, and we're in our senior year, and he's an intern at Capitol, and I'm interning in film, and he's coming home and he's giving me CDs and he's taking me to shows, and all of it for free. And I'm like, excuse me, like, you get paid and you don't pay for this? Like, I'm really in the wrong place, right? So that's kind of like understanding where my friends were and how it could be in there. But I really found that myself was kind of just being open to experiences, like the being at the right place at the right time is one way of putting it. But I went out one night to the Cat and Fiddle to have drinks with people, bumped into this girl that was a senior when I was a freshman. Now I'm a senior. She's been out here working. Oh my gosh, what's up? And she tells me about this thing called DVDs, which I didn't know what that was either back in January of 2000. And so she tells me, no, we're putting we're putting new movies on DVD. We have a movie magazine and we're going to launch a music magazine. And I'm like, what is this? So she's like, do you want to come and be my intern? And I was like, I have one free day. So I think that's a big thing in music. One, relationships, and two, really being willing. Like, I'm a fan at heart. And so it's like, when you're working with people who are fans and want to do it, like, as creative people, you feed off of that energy, you feed off of that. You're like, okay, let's go build together, and you start opening doors. And so it was kind of like that way. So I'm at this DVD company, and they launched the music magazine, and they're like, so you said you liked music, right? Do you want to be the producer of this magazine? And they hired this guy to be the editor, which happens to be Tim Riley, who went to do music later on at Activision. Now is running events for Spotify, who's been a great mentor and a dear friend of mine. But he was somebody that I would go out and like a band, and he would be like, email the band. Yeah. And here I am, like, emailing like thrice and emailing like PYTs. And then one day he's out, and the manager for Playing YT is like, when he says where he's at, he's like, somebody from your place emailed my band. It's the best note they've ever received. And so my name started to just be like, these managers were like, who's this fan, right? Yeah. Who's that girl that is always at that opening show? Like, I would go see Jimmy Eat World, but I was there for Playing YTs, right? It's like, it was just like, people would see you around. And to Angela's point, it's such a small industry that, you end up being caught. It's like, who's that? Okay, she does good work. She likes this. Let's go. Come on board, right? And EA was that accident. I was because of the DVD company and Tim Riley, I got into music supervision, which I also didn't know, because he had all these side projects doing. He knew all the motocross guys. Yeah. So Jeremy Graff, Travis Pastrana, like, he would do all the music for those guys. And he's like, oh, you want a job? So I started doing licensing for him. I was licensing this stuff like Limp Bizkit and Linkin Park for like $250 a side to put on these little videos, right? But that's where I started like getting to know the licensing people at this record company, and start building these connections and relationships. So it was really just being open to kind of what was coming and vibing with it, and sort of it's a trip. Like EA, when that popped up, it was, Sibel, who's still my partner to this day at EA. It's like Steve Schnurr, who started the department, and then Sibel comes in and she brings me in. She goes to E3 to get EA as a client, comes back with a job. And I'm like, oh no, I'm coming too, right? So it's like A month later, she's like, Rafi, we have an internships and we pay our interns. I'm like, I'm in. I don't care what it is. Like, get me in, right? And I was producing stuff, right? I had the titles and whatnot, but I'm like, get me in the door. I'll do the internship thing. And then a month into it, they're like, the internship is over. I'm like, you got to go figure it out. I'll work for free for a minute, right? And they're like paying me out of a consulting thing until they hired me. So it was being persistent and just following your heart.
Yeah. And it's also, I mean, the theme of this conversation has been about networking and really holding the right hands and knowing when to squeeze them, right? And Rafi, you shared in your story about being able to sort of, not only did I advocate and was learning new things as I was going, but I made sure that anytime someone in my network had to step up or moved on, that I was right there behind them, making sure that I was following and paying attention. So I think that's also important when trying to break into this specific industry. I want to talk about the music. Right, music supervisor. I want to get into the music, what role that plays into all of your roles. And Joel, I want to start this conversation with you. Briefly and succinctly, because I know it is a large conversation, but can you walk us through a project in terms of when you begin to actually place music to a film?
Sure, to a film. In best case scenario, this is one of the things that music supervisors have been talking about all the time, is that we're people who are on from the script stage all the way through to marketing and soundtracks. So we're the crew member who is like on sometimes longer than the directors. So we start when it comes in the best case scenario, when the script is written and they're saying, okay, we're greenlit. Then we get a copy of the script. We break it down for all of the music elements. We'll help, tell them about, what the budget might be, make suggestions for songs. If there's things that are happening on camera, like somebody singing or somebody dancing to something, we'll have to go in there and say, okay, we need to get that cleared before we start production. So we'll clear the music. We'll hire songwriters to help, make a song. We'll hire performers to record pre-records. Then when we get into production, we'll be around for people doing the performances, doing playbacks, where people are either lip syncing or doing it live and recording, to working with choreographers, working with the property department for microphones and instruments, helping with everything from, getting somebody who can do a hand double, or actually training an actor about what it should look like if they are faking playing a trumpet. It's all of these little teeny incidences that were happening. And then in post-production is when it really gets busy, where we'll be working to identify and help hire a composer, and work on the budgeting for all of that, and the deal, helping pick songs, working with the director, the editor, the music editor, everybody, to make sure that all the music comes through, creatively to what the director and the producers really want, but also on the business side, to make sure that we have all the rights secured and that the budget is stuck to as closely as possible. And then we'll even be involved in marketing and putting out a soundtrack album and merchandising and all that kind of stuff. So anywhere there's music that has to do with the project, we're going to be involved with. Like I said, we're sometimes on it longer than the director is.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Tony, I want you to continue to elaborate specifically on the clearance process. I think that's always a question that pops up too. And I know that licensing and publishing play a role in it, but I imagine Sony has a large catalog of music that you all just sort of go to when creating these projects. But please correct me if I'm wrong and elaborate on that clearance process.
Well, our projects, it's based on the creative. So it's not like we use just Sony Music, which, by the way, is a sister company. It's separate. It's not like we go just to Sony Music. I mean, we certainly work with our sister companies, but, our projects have music from Universal and from Warner's and from Indies and, from a whole slew of different folks. But you have to, yes, as far as the clearance is concerned, we do have a clearance department that handles that. So whether I'm, in my creative role at the studio, I work very closely with them. So, if on TV, it's sort of like what Joel said on the feature side, except on the television side, I will usually get the scripts ahead of time before the music supervisor, if we hire one. I'll break it down, figure out what the budget is, and then, having been a music supervisor, I sort of have an idea about, what the songs will cost, whether the artists will be easy to clear or not.
Yeah.
I'll consult with my clearance team and then figure out sort of like, budget wise what we're going to do. But, in terms of clearance, once either we do it or a music supervisor does it, if we're not doing clearing in-house, we handle that process. We work with, obviously, just so you know, there are two sides of each song that you have to get clearance for. One is the recording, and the other is the actual song itself. So you have to clear what's called the publishing. Mm-hmm. So the songwriters, you have to get their approval on the use of a song, as well as a publisher. So when you're clearing music, you have to clear both sides, the recording side, unless it's something, as Joel said, where you're doing an on-camera performance. Then obviously you need to figure out what the budget is for that, in terms of the players, the vocalists, etc., and then clear the actual song itself, which is the publishing.
Cool. Thanks, Tony. Angela, I'm curious because I want to ask you the same question, but you're in the ad and commercial space. And so how does what Tony and Joel is that similar to how the process is for you, or does it differ?
I mean, it's similar too. It depends on what the need of the commercial is.
Right.
If someone is performing something in the commercial, then obviously you need to set all these things prior to filming that commercial. It's so similar. I mean, I've worked on film, I've worked on TV, and I've worked on ads, and although they are different mediums, I mean, the process is definitely very similar.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting because I feel like you all have been sharing a lot of great pieces of advice around your career, but also giving us really great insight to what it means to be a music supervisor. And I'm curious, sort of, what are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to being a music supervisor and working in this role? And Rafi, we'll start with you with this question.
This question would have been so different a long time ago. I think because we've been doing this as the same team for a really long time, things have gotten easier for us over the years. Yeah. Honestly, when we started this gig, it was really hard because we really had to educate the music industry as to what games were, and then we had to educate gaming as to the value of music, and that was a pretty brutal process, and one that took a couple of years to sort of get there and prove what that platform could really be. So I think we've broke a lot of those grounds, which is incredible, right? So titles like a FIFA, they kind of almost like self-program at this point, where people know about it, they want to be in it, and it's so easy to get doors open to hear things and get access to music early on. So it's really made the job easier in that sense. I think when there was a shift there between digital really taking over, there was another real challenge for us on the game programming side of things, like a FIFA, for example, where we always try to be ahead, and we caught ourselves in this time where people were recording and pushing something out. So there was no window here to actually set up and market and have some leeway to be aligned. That has also changed. Like, people are now able to sort of plan ahead and hold back, and we can do that alignment a little bit better. I think perhaps maybe the biggest challenge right now currently, it's more about maybe dollars when it comes to like trailers, for example, because for a long time, like, trailers were looked at separately than like TV commercials, right? And then now all of a sudden, like, a lot of that TV advertising budget is gone. It's shifted, it's gone into paid media, and trailers are looked at with a different lens. And so when we're producing content internally at EA, I'll touch, at least 100 trailers in 1 year that we're doing. But that's 100 key trailers. There is another 500, 600, 1,000 plus pieces of content, right, that we program that has other types of music and needs and sort of, what the content piece actually is, that becomes really hard. So you have to really like do a really good job at budgeting at the beginning of the year when you're looking at your content plan, to be like, okay, what's going to be actually a marquee sort of asset here for me to have to be able to look at that with the paid media, with everything that's going to go inside what something would be online only prior, and separate that from some of these smaller content pieces that can't charge or pay for what a regular license would be these days for trailers. So I also catch myself now, obviously, working a ton more with, you know, libraries and working with trailer houses to create things and do a lot of that. So it's kind of expanded to the pool of music and where that stuff is coming from, given that difference, because the volume of content went up and the budgets did not change.
Yeah.
So how do I do that now? You know, and so that's a challenge now.
Can I say something? Can I say something? I don't mean to step on you, Marco, but yeah, Rafi, I think that your biggest challenge from what I've seen from what you do is what you can't do. Because the stuff that you have been doing, you know, with like the FIFA launch and stuff like that, it's like, it always blows my mind that, you know, with games and stuff like that, it's kind of like you just keep inventing stuff that music supervisors do. I mean, you look at what happened with Fortnite and the concerts and stuff like that, but I mean, all of that shit is like mind blowing. Like I never would have thought any of that stuff was possible, or even like, you know, I mean, because games are the one medium that's not fixed. You know, we make a movie and that's it. The soundtrack is done. With games, you're working on them constantly. You're updating FIFA, you're updating all of your Madden and everything like that. You could change the music if you wanted, with like updates and stuff.
And that's, you know, and that's absolutely the goal. You're right. Talk about the challenge. It's the money. The money is the challenge, because you have to pay for all of this.
The ideas aren't the problems. You've got all the ideas. Just how do you pay for it?
Yeah.
We were on a different panel, and I said that when we were talking about like music supervision and what it takes to be a great music supervisor. And a lot of times people were like, oh, I know all this music. Everybody's a music expert. I'm sorry. I work with 11,000 of them at EA. But who can solve the problem, right? Who can figure out that creative solution and solve that problem, like from the business side of things? And Joel nailed it, because our world has continuously evolved.
Right.
Like we have not, it's like I've said, I've been at the same company for like almost 20 years, but my job has not been the same, like on a day-to-day. It's always changing and it's always evolving. And as fans, like as music fans, and you know, as a Brazilian, and FIFA is such a biased thing for me, because it's like, it's my playground, right? It's like, oh, can we do this now? And the coolest thing is that everybody, like the artists, love it, right? So it's like it's this common love that we all have, and it becomes an easy one to achieve certain things. So it's easier to look at that one and be like, oh, this is my favorite, this is it. But it is with where the technology is going and the ability that we have to be updating these games and pushing out content and bringing that, the volume and the cadence isn't there yet, because of how we need to structure our licenses and who the budgets are.
Fair. Thank you all for sharing this in-depth information with our audience today. I feel like we're getting a lot of good advice here. I want to take some questions from the audience, and I'll start with Mia. First question is, how do you, and Tony, I'll direct this to you, and anyone who wants to chime in, feel free to do so. How do you guys feel about royalty-free music libraries, and do you regularly pull from them?
No. Yeah, not at all. No.
Tell us how you really feel.
We only want to work with folks that, you know, pay their artists, that are supporting the art form, and, you know, royalty free, as far as I'm concerned, is a devaluation of music. And it's a real concern for me, and I think it is for most of the community, because what it does is it doesn't compensate the artists, and it doesn't give them, you know, the proper compensation for the work that they do. You know, and I think we have a huge problem culturally in terms of the devaluation of music and people who are involved in the music world. So we just don't do it.
Yeah, honestly, that the Guild of Music Supervisors, one of our big mottos is that music has value. So it's like, you know, our job is, and our passion is working with musicians. You know, we do everything with music except for make it. So anytime that we're working with music, we want to be able to make sure that those who create it are fairly compensated. We may, try and, get the fees down as low as we possibly can. We may try and do this and that. But at the end of the day, we love music and we love musicians, and we want to make sure that somebody's able to eat, make a living doing this, Then people look at music and they say, oh, you know what, it's ephemeral. I turn on the radio and there's music. Why do I have to pay for anything for that?
Right.
And, that's always one of our big struggles, is that, we obviously want to work within our budgets, but then at the same time, we want to make sure that the people we're working for also value what we do and the people who create this music.
Yeah. Thanks, Joel and Tony. Angela, one question that we've gotten, and it comes from Jen in our audience, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, is essentially what is your sort of preferred music taste? And then also, where do you go to find music to place in ads and TV and film and et cetera?
Yeah, okay. I think the most interesting and fun part about being a music supervisor is that you can literally pull music from anywhere. Yeah. Obviously, it's subject to clearance and whether or not it works with your budget and all of that, like administrative stuff, which is something that is a very real thing we have to consider. But I don't have to limit myself to a particular label or a particular genre or anything. As long as it fits the creative and the project, you can literally pull from anywhere. And that is like one of the best parts of my job.
Yes.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. Yeah. In terms of music taste, my music taste is all over the place. I think just as a music fan, it's like, it shouldn't be limited to genre.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of like guest DJ sets and radio mixes. You can probably find some of that online if you're curious, but if she has music she wants to recommend, please let me know too. I'm always listening. Yeah.
Well, that's also part of the questions that we're getting too, is that people are, as music supervisors, I'm sure that people are always recommending songs and songs to you all to place in different projects you're working on. Rafi, how do you sort of navigate those conversations, or do you have a playlist that you just put them all in, and then when you're ready to work, you sift through it, or what does that look like for you?
I think it depends, right? Each project has sort of its own personality. The way that we approach the programming of the music in games is definitely very different than how a trailer search and trailers will come to life.
Yeah.
On the gaming front, I think that we definitely have our trusted sources at this point. Like we have a pretty good wide network of people that we go to at the beginning of programming season, and we communicate, we sit down, we look at priorities across, majors and indies, and we have these relationships across management groups. So it's really like the way that we try to program is really getting a good glimpse of the landscape a year ahead from us. Yeah. And then once we see what that landscape is, we can then understand where those different sounds and artists can belong. And that's where at times the sound of a soundtrack might change slightly. Others, again, when it comes to FIFA, I always play around that it's just great music. We look for great music and slide it in there. There isn't a genre specific thing. But even within FIFA, with the launch of Volta, that did allow us to go edgier and grittier and into like a realm of music that was a little like less polished, that wasn't there before, which adds a great layer to what we didn't have before. So I think it's that, really having those relationships and sort of being like, what's happening 6 months from now, what's happening from now, and having that trust. But I do save all the music that I get, even though I may not listen at this point to everything that's in there. And I will take the time to kind of do, I say Google my inbox, where I put certain terms and then I'll discover some new stuff. And then when it comes to programming season, people sort of know too how to get us at times. Like if you are sending me an email and you say, artist from insert country I've never heard of before, or a country that you don't hear as much, I'm definitely going to listen to that with FIFA in mind. And because that's the goal, right? To try to find things from different parts of the world that can translate and travel and be discovered. So I think that it's that, like, there is a trusted source, but then there is this right place at the right time where I open that email and I listen and I'm like, I love this. Like, what is it? Right. And you start a relationship with a complete random, like out of Nigeria. Like this year was one that I'm like, everything I liked, I was like, what is happening in Nigeria? Like what is in the water now? Because it's the new Sweden. Like everything is out of Nigeria that I like. So yeah.
Thank you. I want to transition our conversation because something that is important in not only just the music industry overall, but also music division is relationships and being able to trust one another. And I'm specifically speaking to really that relationship between whether it's the producer or the director. Essentially, you're trying to make someone else's story and vision come to life through music. And Joel, we talked about this briefly before we went live, but I find the relationship that you've been able to build with Tyler Perry very intriguing and really a foundation for how all relationships and partnerships should go when it comes to music supervision. And I know that you all were working together in 2004 and then sort of were able to blossom into collaborating in such a big way. Talk to us about how that relationship came about and how you've been able to build that partnership.
Yeah, sure. So I was the head of music at Lionsgate when Tyler came in with his first movie idea, Diary of a Mad Black Woman. And I was working on like 50 movies at the time or something like that, like Tony's Load. So I was working on a ton of things, and Tyler came in and he was a first-time filmmaker. And so I talked to him like somebody who was a first-time filmmaker. And I'm like, okay, well, this is how we do it. You know, we go and we pick the music and we put it in, make sure it works for your vision. And so as we talked, I realized that he kind of wasn't about that. And he was about, you know, not necessarily listening to how things were done, but how he felt it should happen. And he came from, you know, obviously from live theater and working and respecting the audience and, you know, getting a vibe for what he's going to want the audience to feel. So he's incredibly intuitive because he's been watching the audience for years and years and years doing his plays. So he knew this better than I did. So when it came time to do the score and pick songs and stuff, he had absolutely a vision of what he wanted. He made a decision and stuck to it. He would listen to my ideas and patiently let me talk. But at the end of the day, he would be like, this is what I want. I would love it if it would be like this, this, this. And I'd be like, you know what? This is your film. Let's do it. And then pretty much every time, you know, when we would have a conversation, I got to be able to anticipate, kind of like hear Tyler's voice in my head about what he would want for something. And, you know, he's so incredibly busy. He's got, you know, 7 television series that he writes and directs and produces and acts in and everything that he's doing. That man is super busy and runs the only studio that's like, you know, cranking out anything right now because they're all in quarantine. So when I get a chance with him to kind of present ideas to him, I have to do all of my research, be ready for it and say, you know, Mr. Perry, here you go, check it out. And if he goes, okay, I'll give him like, you know, 5 options. He'd be like, that one. And then it's done. And so I better have done all the clearances, get it all ready, because there's no second guessing. I don't get a second chance at it. So you know, he's, you know, like I said, he's the most decisive person I've ever worked with. Somebody who's, you know, very thoughtful, but also very instinctive for what he does. And it comes from his, you know, live theater background. So, you know, he has done stuff, he tries them out, he changes his plays as he does it. And that's why he still does, he was still doing Medea's farewell play tour, because that's where he gets his juice. You know, he gets it from being in front of the audience, seeing what they react to, and he changes it week after week based on what he's getting out of it. He doesn't bother with, you know, workshopping things. He does it and puts it up. The audience tells him what's working and what's not. So, and he knows, hears the audience voices in his head, and then hopefully I can hear his voice in my head.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for sharing that insight with us. Something that, Joel, you mentioned, I think, Rafi, you also mentioned it earlier too, is sort of being able to work on projects, but also predict, how can I say this? Sort of predict where the music culture will be when the project is released. And that's sort of, I feel like a hidden talent or a very strong skill set. And Tony, I'm wondering if you have any advice to that when creating a project. How can you predict sort of the success, or that music will still be relevant and popular when the project is released? Because we know specifically in TV and film, it can take, pre and post can take quite a while.
Right. And usually with TV is a little faster. You know, our episodes are compressed, so it's like, 3 weeks, but to getting it out on the air after it's been produced. And then, working on the music for it. So, it's a little more immediate. It's a little more, appropriate to what's going on in the culture. Then, it's much more of a challenge with film because you have that big lead time. Right. But, I think one of the things that we do, and, whether it be we're internally music supervising or with a music supervisor, is having that conversation with the creatives. In TV, it's the executive producers as opposed to the director. The director is part of it. But when you're dealing with, episodic TV, it's with the executive producers. So, you'll have a conversation dealing with sort of the music and what they're looking for. And then, if we're hiring a music supervisor, we'll make sure to have the right fit for the music supervisor on a show. So like, for example, we have a show called For Life, which is executive produced by 50 Cent. And we made sure that our music supervisor would be able to work within the overall context of the show. And we're very blessed to have Yvette Matoye as our music supervisor on it. And, I think it's important to be able to get those kind of connections so that there is that conversation and being able to create music which is appropriate for the show and also works in the context of, what the expectation from both the network and the studio would be.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this earlier in terms of being able to, whether it's preserve culture through music placements in TV and film, but also being able to respect, for what we were talking about specifically the Boondocks, right? A show that I would consider really in the Black culture being really big, and I don't want to say influential, but just hilarious, right? And knowing that a lot of the actors who played on that were, again, influential in the Black community. And we talked about really being able to bring more POC and female voices into music supervision. And you did that in 2016 with your Women Who Score project. So I want you to talk more about that and why it was important to be able to produce such a project.
Well, it was really interesting because I was having lunch with a female composer, and, we were talking about the fact that, you would see at the Hollywood Bowl these performances by composers doing retrospectives of their music in film or TV. And it's like you never saw the visibility of women or people of color being able to do that. So I was like, you know what? I want to do something. So I contacted at the time a group called Grand Performances, and Michael Alexander was executive director. And I said, I have an idea. I want to throw it by you, where we do a program just highlighting the work of women composers. And it was the first one, believe it or not, that was ever done. And what we did was we got Laura Karpman, who does Lovecraft Country with Raphael Sadiq. And we had her as our music director, and we picked compositional pieces in film, TV, and games from 20 female composers and had those pieces played. And it was just an electric moment to be in the audience and see these young women who would turn to their parents and say, I want to do that. They were composer or musicians, and now they sort of were, they saw, see yourself be, on stage. And it was just a really great moment. And I think from that, there was a greater awareness about this amazing talent of female composers that, we're starting to see, a number of really gifted composers who are getting recognition and getting hired in film and TV. Right. That, we're not having that opportunity before. So, it was one of my most proud moments to be able to be a part of and to try and create that. I remember, it was funny because that was Joel and I served on a panel for the Guild many, many years ago. And, you know, one of the things I talked about was the importance of diversity and inclusion in composers and for music supervisors. And it's just so great to see it finally coming to life, you know, over these years.
And in no small part, I don't want to not underscore this, as it were, but with your efforts, you know, you did a great thing. You have the power to hire tons of composers, and you've really, you know, not only talked about it on panels, but have really made it a reality. So,
you know, thank you, Joel.
No,
it's important.
So, yeah.
Angela and Raph, I'm curious how the conversation around diversity and equity around music supervision has played a role in sort of the careers and jobs that you've chosen to take on. And Raph, we could start with you.
I don't, you know, it's funny because I've always been felt like an outsider in so many different ways, being an immigrant and a woman and all of these things. So it's kind of, it's amazing to see what this year has been and having people actually go out and advocate for these things and start seeing some of these change hopefully really become part of a way of life, not just a marketing ploy or whatever that might be. I think from a programming perspective, it's something that, you know, just because of who I am, it was always on the back of my mind. Every soundtrack I've ever touched has had female artists, and I placed the first Brazilian band and all this. Like, I always am trying to give voice and find that one thing that, like I said, can use our platform to travel into a new place. And I think that really came through, truthfully, not just myself, but my department, you know, in general, in how we've approached our programming back into, you know, we were looking at Matt in 2003 with this like exclusive Killer Mike song that doesn't exist except for Matt, and I'm like, yo, I gotta get him to release this stuff. And so we've been supporting this artist just because they've been doing great music. Like hip hop is the one thing that when I came to America, like my life completely changed. You know, I came here in 1990, what was that, 96, 97, and the first album I bought was Doggy Style and Check Pad, and then and When Things Fall Apart by The Roots. And with those three things, I was just like, this music is incredible, right? And sort of completely fell in love with it because it's always been that fusion of cultures and sounds, and there is a place for everybody to really make it their own, which I just love so much about, you know, hip hop in general. And so when I look at the history of like the last 18 years of programming that we've been doing, they have been a staple of all of these soundtracks unintentionally because the music is great. And to your point, like we're pinpointing trends. Like we had, you know, we did a track with Migos like 3-something years ago for Madden, and I'm like, you know, it's funny because we go through these things internally where I'm begging my people to be like, yo, like we gotta work with these guys. And then like, a year goes by and they're like, oh, we gotta work with those guys. We've done that, you know? So it's like, it is a really big part of our jobs to be on that trend, alert, right? What's really happening next, and where do we see like things shift, and make it, you know, a part of that. Like when we talk about trends, like I'm not lying, guys, like it's amazing, whether it's because of this year or what's happening, like African music is coming up in such beautiful way. It just gives me chills like talking about it and thinking about it, because it's really coming. Island music, African music, like from all of the different parts, like, and we're gonna see that. It's going to be here for a minute. It's just starting, right? And we're gonna see that infusion come into different parts and different genres and in different worlds. So I think now it's just more exciting that people are paying more attention to it. It makes our job a little less hard on the selling front because we were there like already. So.
Right. Thank you. Something that we've gotten from our audience and they want to know from all of you is what has been your favorite project to work on? Angela, I'm curious to hear from you, and then we can do a round robin style.
I feel like I can't really answer that question. It's like choosing who's your favorite child or something like that. I'm gonna have to respectfully pass on that, but
okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Tony, how about you? Do you have a favorite project that you've worked on, or a project that's been the most fun?
Well, like Angela, I think, there's like moments from different projects that I just find really amazing. Working with James Iha from the Smashing Pumpkins on doing a score for a movie for James Franco was really great. Working with Baz Luhrmann on The Get Down and with Stephanie Diaz-Matos was an incredible experience. There's just been so many really great shows and projects that, I just feel really blessed. And what's really great is the next ones that are the ones that are coming up, I see really exciting potential on the music front and being able to sort of expand the culture because of stuff that's coming up. And, the fact that there are projects where I envision more women and people of color being able to get roles in really means a lot because, again, we're creating these authentic voices in terms of storytelling and also in terms of music. And I'm just really excited for the future.
Yeah, well, I like the way that you shifted that question, sort of favorite moments. Angela, with that question in mind, do you have any favorite moments you want to share from your career as a music supervisor?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I worked on this film called VHS, and we had Wise Blood, who's a favorite artist of mine, do an on-camera performance, and she sang it live, and it was absolutely beautiful. Recently I worked on a Google spot where we had Aloe Black do a cover of Jonathan Richman's song, and I've been a longtime fan of Jonathan Richman, and that was
so cool. What song?
Excuse me?
What song?
New Kind of Neighborhood.
Nice.
Yeah, check it out. It's online right now. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like, there's so many cooks in the kitchen, so oftentimes we're not the sole decision maker. So when something that you personally really love makes it to the final spot, it's super exciting.
Yes, thank you. Rafi, how about you? Favorite moments from, I feel like you've been sprinkling them throughout this whole conversation, but what have been some of your favorite moments from your career as a music supervisor?
Unfortunately, my career is filled with favorite moments, man. It's incredible. I'm shameless, I everybody in the company knows my heart's FIFA. Like I fucking love FIFA, and I obviously love The Sims and the stuff that we do there, and the stuff that we do with Madden and performances and Madden Bowl and how we've programmed, Fight Night and UFC and all of these things. Like there's always like the favorite songs and the favorite things, but I think FIFA has a lot of different significances for me. FIFA 2004 in particular was my first official supervision title back in 2003. And that was the year that we made it so global and started to play around with all of that. So I always say that I look at that as like my firstborn. So I guess it's okay to pick your firstborn. They get it. And that has then led into all of these other sort of great experiences to be able to, book international events with, some of my favorite bands and meet like Pelé, like the biggest, football player of all times. I'm sorry, Maradona, R.I.P., but it's Pelé. And things like that, like so and to your point, I think it's been the place where I've had the most creative freedom, and it's been my biggest sort of outlet to really pour in something that's here and then see people vibe with it and whatnot. So it's a big reward. It's a big payoff, like for what I do.
Thank you, Tony. I'm sorry, Joel. Last but not least, I was looking directly at Tony and then.
Sure. I've had a few, I think you're talking about like moments that are just great. Some of mine have been some of my hardest ones. I did a movie called Heartbeats recently that we shot in India and with like no budget, but we got amazing songwriters to come in and write all original songs to a big dance movie. It was directed by Dwayne Adler, who did Step Up and Save the Last Dance franchises and stuff. And so I got Ginger Shankar to be the composer and write a bunch of the songs. And every single piece of music, except for the like one or two, was completely original to the entire film. It was all working with choreographers who would say, I want something that sounds like this to do this kind of a dance number. And so I would bring in songwriters and we'd put them in the studio and start doing demos and start recording them. And every single one of them was totally original to the film. And it was, you know, it was so hard because there was so little money, but it was such a great project that it made it all worthwhile. And working with Ginger was, you know, magical. And I worked on, what else I worked on? I Can Do Bad All By Myself. And I got to, you know, do pre-records and playback with Mary J. Blige and with Gladys Knight and Martin Winans, and, you know, do an entire gospel choir with him and watch him just, you know, tune the choir and work on the songs with him. And then, you know, we've done pre-records with him and he's like, no, I'm just gonna, you know, wing it. And so we did a pre-record with the band so that we would always be in time, you know, take after take. We did one take with him and the gospel choir singing out and the band, like, you know, pantomiming. And then it was going so well that we ran out of pre-record. And luckily, knowing how Tyler Perry works, I knew that we should have the real band there, and we plugged in and went hot with all the instruments, and they were able to keep playing and the choir kept singing. And so we went for another 5 minutes of this epic, you know, gospel choir scene, and people were crying and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
And it's like all of these different things, you know, it's like you have to have the skills to be able to anticipate this and work with it and, you know, figure out how to, when you work with somebody like, you know, Gladys Knight, you know, and you say, you know, you like, you know, Miss Knight, would you like to sing this live? And she goes, absolutely. And she just sings and she's like one take and she
just drops the mic.
And it was like, there's no auto tuning needed. There is nothing like that. She knows what she's doing. She's a pro.
That's super cool. Thank you all so much for sharing those what seem to be and sound like magical moments in your career. And our audience has been incredibly engaging today, and I want to give it up to our audience for being able to not only sort of be here today, but also connecting with each other in the chat. And you all have made some great fans in today's session. And thank you all so much for being here and sharing your insight into music supervision.